Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. A lot on the agenda today, busy week. I'll start off with something that I took note of earlier in the week, Dr. Lopkin, and that is Mr. O'Leary, the actual, believe it or not, creator of Shark Tank, was talking about his history as an investor, which goes back about 40 years. And he was saying, number one, that he points to AOC as the number one flag bearer of job killer in the United States. And also, I thought this was a lot more interesting that he talked about as he started as an investor, that it was his go to places for investment opportunities were the Boston corridor with MIT and Harvard and Silicon Valley. Now he reflects on it and says that these are the two last places that he would ever even think of going. And with the AOC situation, she was just bragging about killing 25,000 jobs headed for, I believe, her district. So, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Leary also said that right now, New York is absolutely uninvestable. That's partly because of AOC's influence and getting rid of those 25,000 potential jobs, also the rising crime rate. But he also pointed out that the two places he focuses on now are Texas and Florida.
It's no surprise, um, and very interesting enough on that whole idea or concept about New York and Silicon Valley, Boston, all that. Again, you look at it; they're the ones losing population, and it's for a reason. I guess my question to you, Dr. Lopkin, is as you lose your tax base, I'm talking middle class to upper middle class. You look at California; it's crushing deficit. I mean, do they just become social enclaves, socialist enclaves?
Well, it depends on who's in charge. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, has actually started turning around what he's been saying, and he sees the writing on the wall for New York City if they keep going down this path.
No, that's the
So,
quintessential point. Just to interject, you are
yeah,
dead on. It's not that he's had a come to Jesus epiphany. It's that again, New York draining, bleeding population, and in particular New York City. If this continues, he's effed, and his city is effed.
yeah, and it's not just people who are fleeing, it's businesses. And people don't realize that you cannot run a city or a state without a strong business environment, because that business environment creates jobs for the residents. It's the core of the tax base that funds all of the programs that Democrats are so fond of, but you can't fund them without businesses. By the same token, though, you can't treat businesses like a piggy bank because they will go elsewhere. And they've shown that. They're moving to Florida, they're moving to Tennessee, they're moving to Texas, and they're leaving these liberal cities. Uh, we just saw literally dozens of businesses saying they have to leave Portland because it's just too dangerous.
No, that's true, and you may have a really good point about the tax base. Again, for our national audience, Hartford's just a pinprick on the map, but it's a perfect example of liberal ideology. Having grown up in the Hartford metro area, uh, unlike other cities, well, at one time in the 1960s and 70s, Hartford was had a flourishing business climate, vacated, some their fault, some not. But anyway, the point is, you can do all the Ferris wheels and museums you want when your industrial and business based exoduses, you're screwed. And that Hartford's a perfect example. Adrian's Landing, convention centers, science museums. Oh yeah, it's all great. Yeah, that's great if you have a viable business environment. If you don't, you're in the shitter, which Hartford is and other cities. Am I not correct?
You're absolutely correct. And I mean, Hartford is an excellent example.
The great
Hart,
example, yes.
Hartford is the only city I have ever been to that McDonald's could not generate enough business on Sundays to stay open. And that's because people left. Businesses left and the people
And
followed,
crime came in, though.
and crime came in. Now, you're going to start seeing a bit of a disconnect between the businesses leaving and the people leaving now because so many more places are allowing people to work remotely. They don't have to move when a business moves unless they're doing something like manufacturing or industrial work. But people are a cost for a city and state because you have to provide services. And without that business base providing the tax base, the only option is to raise personal income taxes, to raise sales taxes, which in turn gets people to leave.
No question. It's a self fulfilling, perpetuating scenario. But you're looking at this blue state, red state, and you know uh, Marjorie Taylor Greene, a nutcase, at least in my opinion. But even a broken clock is right twice a day. Not that I agree with her assertion, but she'd mentioned a couple weeks ago that America needs a divorce, meaning red states should separate, or red states should separate from blue states. I'm not in agreement with that, but one third of Americans do, and the real underlying, and we wouldn't waste time mentioning her because she's really not worthy of that. But it goes to show that, let's say, back in time, the time machine, even 30 years ago, which isn't that long ago, there there was some commonality between blue and red. You had, Republican governors of liberal states like New York and California. But Dr. Lockwood, my question to you: has it gone, like, to use a divorce analogy? Are there irreconcilable differences? I mean, does, let's say, a state like, I don't know, Tennessee have anything in common with California? I say not.
Well, I don't know that Tennessee and California ever had anything in
Okay,
common,
but I'm
but
talking about the blue,
yeah.
red, and California is the example, the quintessential example. They're bleeding businesses, and yet they're outlawing in 10 years gas-powered cars. I mean, help me.
Yeah, I don't think the differences are irreconcilable. And the fact, if you take a look at that poll where 30% agreed that red and blue states should get a divorce, it was actually fairly equally distributed. 15% came from the wackos on the right, and 15% came from the wackos on the left. Which tells us, though, that there are 70% of Americans that are more moderate and who believe things can be fixed. And we've seen this before. We saw it with New York City in the 80s and early 90s under David Dinkins, even before that, where New
With
York
Mayor
City was,
Lindsay.
yes, where New York City was falling apart. And finally, New Yorkers said, okay, we need to fix this. And Rudy Giuliani came in and turned New York City around. And now we're going back down. It's like, well, we fixed it, but now we have to be more liberal, and they're destroying the city again. But it really does seem to go in cycles. And remember, it wasn't that long ago that California's, even though it was a really screwed up election, elected Republican Arnold Schwarzenegger as governor. So I think when things get bad enough, the voters do go, all right, you know what? Enough is enough. We saw it with Lori Lightfoot just last week, where they went, you know what? We wanted to give her a chance. She typifies, liberal beliefs, and she let crime get out of hand, and she forced businesses to leave because it was too dangerous. So we can't give her a second term. So I think things can still turn around.
I think things can. That's the operative word. I mean, I can become a billionaire. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. I'm not as optimistic as you are, Dr. Lockton. I think there are tipping points, and I think California, possibly New York, could be at that point. I mean, because people leaving are usually people that have some work ethic, skills, so on and so forth, and the people that remain just enhance the psychopathic nature of states like California with their psychopathic governor, who is now absent without leave, as the
Right. Also, remember though, we have two built-in breakpoints when these states and cities go off the rails like California is. One is the fact that the House of Representatives representation is based on population.
hmm
So the more people that leave California, when they lose influence in the House because they've lost so many people that they're losing a seat, that starts putting the brakes on. By the same token, the Electoral College, they're going to have less representation in the Electoral College because they're losing population. And it's the deep blue states that are losing that population. So you're going to see less, you've heard Democrats complain that the last two Republican uh, presidents, they lost the popular vote, so they need to get rid of the Electoral College. Well, the Electoral College is there to stop the decay caused by extremists.
I would agree with that. I think that is one of the indicative of the genius, the true genius, which I don't. I'm sorry to say this. I'm on a pessimistic note today. Does not it no longer has, but our founding fathers did. So yes, it will put the brakes or potentially help put the brakes on. But again, I think it's still up in the air. When you go to Crazyville, if craziness feeds on craziness. But speaking of craziness, we have Atlanta and Antifa. One of the organizations I hate most, and one of the reasons for that, it's not scientific in any way. I don't know what show it was on, and they had an Antifa leader, some spoiled little brat, probably from Trinity College or something, an entitled piece of shit that will be, probably getting a lot of, kudos for his, radicalization and his radical views. And guess what? By the time he's 35, he'll join his father's law firm. But these people are not inner city people. They're not the down and outers. They're spoiled little brats, and they basically wreaked havoc on a police facility that was in process of being built in Atlanta. Your thoughts?
Well, let's be clear about this. They didn't wreak havoc on a facility. They threw Molotov cocktails and bricks at police officers. They assaulted the police. This is why they've been arrested under domestic
True.
terrorism charges. Now, what's going on in Atlanta actually blew the mainstream media out of the water. And you'll notice there's very little coverage of the incident because of
Almost
this.
none.
Because since the Trump administration, the mainstream media has been dismissing Antifa as, oh, they're not a real organization. There's no central organization. It's just random people. These folks, 23 arrests, 21 of them were not from Georgia. These 23 people were coordinated. They had weapons. They had uniforms. They're all wearing the black. This was very obviously organized. They People arranged for them to have lawyers. People arranged to get them to Atlanta. This blew the narrative that Antifa is not an organized organization. Uh, Sorry, that wasn't phrased better. But blew that story out of the water. So the mainstream media is left covering their tracks and not talking about the fact that what they're fighting against is additional police training, which, of course, Everybody's been talking about police reform since George Floyd. This was a step in that direction, and Antifa's fighting against it. But the training facility, which Antifa and the opponents have labeled Copland, is not a police training facility. It is a first responder training facility, which means it was also meant to train firemen. It was also meant to train paramedics. We want these people being trained. And you will note, again, as I said, the bulk of these people are not coming from Atlanta. These are not locals who are upset that their tax money is being used to build this. The citizens of Atlanta want this facility. It's outside agitators who are attacking the police in order to create chaos.
My only question would be is how are they going to deal with being in prison? They won't have mommy and daddy tucking them in at night and having warm cornflakes in the morning. I think it's going to be traumatic. They'll have to have well, they'll have a safe room. It's called prison. But
And
yeah,
that's also a very good point. They are stuck there because the judge stuck to his guns, and the 21 members that were from outside of Georgia were denied bail. They are staying locked up until the trial.
oh well, my heart bleeds for them. Um, Well, we're getting more on the political realm of things. Uh, Biden still pledges to visit Palestine, Ohio, and on that we have more criticism for Mayor Pete. My first question is: I know I asked this last week, but I really have grown to, I'm sorry to say, vehemently despise this unqualified phony Mayor Pete. Is his are the knives coming out?
Oh, they're
Have
not
they
coming.
circled the wagons? And is this guy through? I hope.
Yeah, they're not coming out. They're out. Moderate Democrats have been very vocal about the fact that he has failed at everything he was supposed to do. There, yeah, there's very little support for him. His political career is over.
Well, we can only hope so. Speaking of careers that are over, is the FCC nominee, chairperson nominee. Um, she resigned, Gigi Sloan, and some reports saying it's a huge setback for Biden. I disagree with that, but she's a real freak and indicative of the kind of nuts and unqualified morons Biden administration has become famous for. And we'll point to Mayor Pete as a road
Yeah,
sign
this
of that.
I don't know that this is such a big deal. This
It's
is just
nothing.
another really bad choice
A
by
moron.
Biden. Her, this is not recent. She was nominated by Biden 16 months ago. He couldn't get her through the previous Senate, never mind this one. Manchin is the one who came out and said, she's not getting through. And, watching Joe Manchin over the last several weeks, he has stopped the left at every turn. And I can't quite decide if he's trying to save his political career or if it's just straight out revenge for them screwing him around.
I think it's the first. He's saving his little ass or big ass, however you want to look at it. There was a report that he is among, maybe not even among, the most vulnerable senatorial candidate coming up in the next election cycle. Um, I'm really not digging him. I know Carnivore Bites gave him accolades. I think he's a full of shit politician. He miscalculated. Too bad. Good riddance. He empowered Biden, and he also put forth legislation that was detrimental in many ways to our economy. and infrastructure. So bon voyage. I think he's covering his ass. He did not find Jesus. He did not have a come to Jesus moment. He's panicking, and I think it's too little, too late. And
Oh
speaking of
no,
too little and too late,
I don't think
he's
he had to come.
considering 2024, which I think is what he is smoking pot or something even more dramatic than that.
Well, I don't know that he's seriously considering 2024, but I don't think he had a come to Jesus moment. My question is, I think he knows his political career is done for this, and he's just trying to, take it out on the left for what they did to him. I'm not even sure he's trying to save his career. I don't think that he thinks it can be saved.
I think that insight is fantastic, Dr. Lopkin, because I believe you are correct. I believe, yes, he's floundering and flailing, but maybe he knows that he's FU'd, because it's a family podcast, and he's saying he's going scorched earth. He's pissed at Schumer and others because he knows, let's be honest, if you can sell his his legacy and his election to West Virginia, then you are salesperson of the century.
Yeah, he's incredibly vulnerable right now. The odds are that West Virginia will elect a Republican senator in 2024 simply because West Virginia is and has been for quite a while a very red state.
Well, he's always been the outliner, but because he knew how to play it, just like Lieberman did, play both sides of the fence. It worked for a while. I'm sorry, he's probably not the brightest bulb in the Christmas tree either. You can see my love for him. To get hoodwinked by Chucky Schumer, hello, you're not exactly a Mensa candidate.
Yeah, that was very disappointing.
Let's
He
be
should have
honest.
seen it coming. I don't understand how he didn't. Schumer was promising things that he had no ability to deliver, and Manchin really should have seen that.
Yes, his whole career is basically in politics. Never worked a day in his life. Just kidding. And that's all. He should know it after being in politics for longer than the Ice Age. Yes, it was a bad miscalculation. And my only thoughts on that is bon voyage, baby. Someone who might not getting the bon voyage is RFK Jr. See, I'm not as optimistic as you are, Dr. Lab, because when you always talk about moderate Democrats, I'm thinking, yeah, okay, well, where exactly are they? But anyway, that aside, RFK is looking at a presidential run in on the obviously Democratic side in 2024. I think the Democratic Party is so mashugana for our Jewish friends out there that anyone who's even remotely sane look at the last electoral election cycle in the Democratic primary. Anyone that's even remotely sane will be blown out of the water.
It's possible. Honestly, the primaries on both sides are where the wackos come out and vote.
Agreed.
And then, of course, everybody's got to move closer to the center to convince the rest of the country, to vote for them in the general. But RFK Jr. brings up some very interesting possibilities. I mean, first of all, he is still a Kennedy, and that does, while it's not the currency it once was, it does still bring Democrats to the table. Second of all, he is married to Cheryl Hines, which means he can also split Hollywood.
So he's a
So
carpetbagger like Kerry?
I don't know if he's a carpetbagger,
I'm kidding.
but I mean, just look at those two factors. That's a big blow to the Democratic base, and he is to the right of Biden. So he has a better chance of appealing to moderate Democrats than Biden does, since he's been kowtowing to the left.
Possibly for
Now,
whatever's left of
I
the
don't
moderate Democrats. If you replayed the 2020 primary debates, okay, yes, a lot of crazies come out on the Republican Party. I get it, but if you watch those debates, at least you're looking at America. I mean, like things that are within the realm of normalcy. The Democratic primary debates were la la. You're talking about like another world of
Right,
insanity.
but you keep dismissing the moderate Democrats, but
None.
going to what you were saying, pay attention to the 2020 Democratic primary debates. Biden got the nomination because he convinced people he was a moderate. So yes, those moderate Democrats still come out and vote, and they voted against the left. Now, Biden lied to them and
Lied.
immediately started kowtowing
Does
to
that
the left.
surprise you that he lies?
Well, Biden's been lying for 50
I
years.
think he lied when he was born.
It shouldn't surprise anybody. But the fact of the matter is, the Democratic Party knew a leftist candidate could not win a general election. So they packaged Biden for the moderates. So, yes, there are still moderate Democrats out there,
You
and
do
they're
agree with me that it's an endangered species, not
what? No,
dead but endangered.
no, not only is it
I
not
disagree.
endangered, they're actually resurging because you've seen what the left did. It was the more moderate Democrats in Chicago that just got rid of Lightfoot. It's the more moderate Democrats in New York that turned several Congress seats Republican. The moderate Democrats are gaining in power because they have seen the damage that the left has done.
I certainly hope you are correct and you had some compelling points that I do agree with, and hopefully it will come to fruition. But it was certainly a horror show looking at the 2020 presidential debates on the Democratic side. If that's indicative of where they were going, hopefully the moderates will come to the rescue. Um, Speaking of that, Steven Spielberg, obviously one of the maybe the greatest director of all time, possibly. That's certainly within more than debatable. A big left wing lib was talking about the outrage he's feeling towards anti-Semitism. I also am in agreement with that, but my retort for him would be then stop voting for left wing radical Democrats who are the epicenter of anti Semitism, and his California is rampant with anti Semitism. So, yeah, you can have editorials, that are really nice and that's really compelling, maybe not, maybe yes, but how about stop committing your own demise,
Yeah,
Mr. Spielberg?
in the case of Spielberg, it's more than just a vote because Spielberg gives tons of money to political candidates. And he needs to put his money where his mouth is and start funding candidates who are standing up to the anti Semitism that is rampant in the left now.
Okay, but the question is liberal does liberal ideology trump, and I don't mean Donald Trump, obviously, other Trump everything else? And you can look at people like Blumenthal, the list goes on, that basically voting for their own demise.
Yeah, it's very common. Political ideology is ingrained in people. There's very few people out there that actually look at an election and look at the candidates. They just go, well, I'm a Republican, I'm voting for Republicans. I'm a Democrat, I'm voting for Democrats. And this has been a bone of contention for me for a long time. I was a Democrat for a long time. I was a Republican for a long time. Now I am unaffiliated because both parties have pissed me off to the extent that I don't want to be affiliated with either one of them. But
Could not argue with that.
most people don't apply critical thinking, and Democrats, especially on the far left, know this, and it's one of the reasons that critical thinking skills are no longer taught in the leaning school system because they don't want you to apply critical thinking skills because then you're going to see that they're full of shit and stop putting them in office.
I think it's bigger than that. I would not argue with anything you've just said. However, I think it's also a naivete playing a huge role. In other words, people like Spielberg, great at directing movies, probably pretty much of a dumb shit when it comes to understanding politics and other things related, all things related, I should say, because I think he's still delusional that it's the 1950 liberal Democratic, party that was pro-Israel and pro this and very, very conscientious about the plight of Jews, both in America and around the world. And hello, nothing goes on forever. And shithead, wake up and smell the coffee because it's not the 1960s. Hello.
Actually, that's a very good point. Liberal, far left Democrats look at their party as the Democratic Party of the 1960s, fighting for freedom of speech, fighting for civil rights. Unfortunately, that's not the party of today. Now, the Republicans are more the blue collar
Yes.
party. Take a look at what went on in Georgia. The liberals were decrying it as Jim Crow 2.0, when in fact, Georgia actually expanded access to voting for most people, and Democrats benefited from it. They picked up seats in Georgia because of the new laws. So they're not looking at what's real, they're looking at the myth. Now, this isn't new, and it's certainly not limited to the Democrats. Going all the way back, there's a line from the John Wayne Jimmy Stewart movie, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, where they're talking about the Old West. And the line is, when the truth becomes legend, print the legend. And that's what they do now. That's what the media does now. Very little of what we see has anything to do with facts or truth. It's about the legend.
And the legend's there to keep people, Jews and others, on the reservation. Let's be honest.
Yes.
Because they don't do their own due diligence and they're so a bunch of dumbasses that they think that the left wing liberal, the AOC, the squad, wake up and stop being lazy and do your research and put your Mr. Spielberg your money where your fat mouth is. That's just my humble opinion. Speaking of humble opinions, I think Joe, that is Aviator Joe, needs some maybe new pair of orthopedic shoes. Brandon falls again a number of times, and yeah, it's an old punchline in the gaff machine. But now he's literally at a point where he can't basically keep his shit together for more than maybe 3 or 4 minutes. Your thoughts? And with that, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, with that, Joe Rogan, obviously, I think he's the podcaster supreme, came out and said that he truly believes, and I don't think you have to be a genius to figure this one out, but I still give him kudos, that Mr. Biden, Aviator Joe, is highly mentally impaired, and Mr. Rogan will not vote for him.
yeah, Joe Biden's health is not what we're being told.
A hundred
And as
percent.
and as evidence, I will present the fact that his doctor recently came out and said, yes, he's absolutely healthy. He is capable of running the country. And then approximately 1 week later, and you didn't see a lot of this on the news, Joe Biden checked himself into the hospital to have a cancerous growth removed. Now,
Hmm.
the fact that he had a cancerous growth removed is not life shattering, it's not earth shattering. Reagan had cancerous
No, it was a basal
growth
cell. This,
removed.
yeah.
Yeah, it was there are a couple of other presidents that have had this while they were in office. It's not a big deal. The big deal comes is because those presidents were all upfront about it. They said, yes, I've got a cancerous growth. We're having it removed. There's no big deal. Biden covered it up. The doctor covered it up. Obama's physician has come out on numerous occasions and said they are covering up Joe Biden's health just from what he has seen, and he has not examined him as a patient. But
Okay,
just
let me
from
ask you a
what he has
question. Okay,
seen,
you have a good point, but we need to clarify things because I'm someone that had several basal cells. It's literally nothing. I'm being honest with you. Okay, there's basa, then there's squama, and then there's melanoma, which is deadly serious, like really deadly serious. Why even cover it up? It's really absolutely nothing. I know it's cancer, I get it, but it's nothing. You can with basal cell, you may not
exactly.
even have to have it removed, and probably nothing's going to happen.
Exactly. Why would you cover it up? And it's because, in this case, because Biden has covered up everything with his health. And the best thing I can compare it to, honestly, is Donald Trump with his taxes. Where is the outrage that Biden's medical records are not being made public? Every other president has done this. They went after Trump's tax records because every president revealed them and he didn't. And quite frankly, I think a president's health, especially when you get to the age of Joe Biden, is a lot more relevant to the job than their tax forms.
I would agree 100% with that. And then, just I'm not going to spend any time on Donald Trump. Hopefully, he will be not be with us. I don't mean literally. I mean figuratively for too much longer. Politically, that is. But yeah, he mishandled that like he mishandles everything. Instead of lying and bullshitting, which is what he does as well, not to the degree of Aviator Joe, but instead of saying I'm being under audit and all this crap, he should have said it's not the law. I don't have to release it, and I'm not going to give fuel to the fire of my enemies. And that's it. And it would have been a nothing burger. But that's just my little
Right.
editorial
Had
on.
had
Go ahead.
Biden just said, "Yes, I've got a cancerous growth. It's nothing. I'm having it removed." End of story. It would not bring up the question of what else the doctor is holding back.
Agreed, but not to use a bad pun. That's his pathology. Do you get it?
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, he's a liar. He would lie. It's like George from Seinfeld. He
Oh,
did never had to lie. He could have had the date with the girl anyway, but he has to say he's a nuclear physicist or a marine bio. That's Biden. He lies. That's what he does. That's his pathology. Again, no pun
yes.
intended. Speaking of lying, he was talking about how the Republicans are going to be the killer of Medicare, Medicaid, other entitlements. But Dr. Lopkin, hold on. What's going on here with the several $100 billion?
Yeah, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office came out with a report revealing that President Biden moved $307 billion away from Medicare Advantage. And what did he put this money towards? Well, 80 billion of it went to expand the IRS.
For
70
obviously only rich people, though, right? You need
Of
those agents
course,
only for the rich people. There you go. And I have a bridge
76
to sell you.
76 billion of this went to reduce greenhouse gases. 36 billion went to refundable tax credits for green energy. There's also a couple of other projects that this money went to, but this was Medicare money. It was allocated to Medicare. What's the result of this? This is going to cost Medicare recipients up to $540 per year per beneficiary in their benefits. So he's been touring the country yelling that the Republicans are going to take away Medicare, and he took $307 billion away from Medicare.
How come I haven't seen it on Nora O'Donnell's CBS nightly news? I missed it. I must have been going. I probably went to get a coffee break or something.
Probably. I
Yes.
have seen no coverage of this in the mainstream media. I saw brief coverage of it on Fox News, but the only way you find these things is if you actually pay attention to what the government itself is releasing. The CBO report was released to the public. You can find this online. And as a longtime journalist, I still get notifications when things like this come out. And yeah, it absolutely appalls me that the mainstream media is covering up for Lunch Pail Joe
Well,
and
they're
saying,
also
oh, yes, it's the Republicans that are going to take away Medicare when the government itself is reporting that Biden is cutting Medicare benefits.
the lack of a real press, supposedly the third rail, is really appalling and scary. And just maybe it's a lighter note. I don't really think so. When you have a president with dementia, I encourage our listeners to go to YouTube and just get clips of it's all over the place, not reported in the corporate mainstream media, but it's actually funny, but also really scary. Like shit ass scary. Like he was in Atlanta and he was talking about something about like he was not even making any sense about. They took his like they opened up his skull and yeah, he didn't. He might not have had a brain. I mean, totally not. And then he was at some event. I think it was yeah, commemorating a Bloody Sunday in Atlanta, and he basically looked like he was. It was Weekend at Bernie's on steroids. I think he is incapable. How does this sound, Dr. Lopkin? Because it's been over a year. He is now. He's gotten to the point. He's so degraded that he's incapable of holding a press conference. How do you like that, Dr. Lopkin?
Yeah, it really is
I believe that's
sad.
true.
And, as much as I hate to say this, I would advise our listeners to seek out the foreign news press because they have been covering what's actually going on with the Biden administration, where the national news here in the US is covering it up. There are, if you go online, you can actually see the footage where foreign anchors on news programs are reporting things that Biden said and then literally laughing at him.
Oh yeah, you can look at
We have
Sky News in
become a
Australia. They can't hold it together. I mean, they're cracking up.
well, Sky News is a bad example
I
because
got
Sky
yeah, they're
News
biased. I get it. Yeah.
does swing right. But go to almost any source because the foreign press does not cover up for him. And you see, we have become the laughing stock of the world. And Biden keeps claiming, and Karine Jean Pierre keeps claiming, oh, he's leading NATO's charge in Ukraine and he's meeting
He's
with these
leading nothing.
leaders and
He's
no,
leading
he's
nothing.
leading nothing. He's to use an Obama term, he's leading from behind, and the foreign press is laughing at us.
Okay,
And
my question
that's
to you is he capable of a press conference? I say not. I'm serious about that too.
I don't think he's capable of taking more than 2 to 3 questions. He can
That's a
probably
press conference.
well,
I
he
mean, a
can probably
formal press conference.
no,
Forget about it.
take it. He can get out there, he can make a statement because all he has to do is read it. He can choose 3 predetermined questions to be asked, which he's got the answers written down to, but he does not have the capability of handling questions on the fly anymore. And
Which would
we've
be a
seen it.
formal press
Yes.
conference.
Well, not even just a formal press conference. We've seen where he leaves Marine One or goes to Marine One, and reporters are shouting questions, and he's waving them off. He can't
Or
even
running.
handle questions there.
But it is common practice for presidents to have, even Reagan, have formal press conferences. And my assertion is that Aviator Joe has now reached the point where he is incapable of that, and they know it. His handlers know it.
Well, his handlers know it. The media knows it. They're not happy about it. They've been railing for the last 18 months about their lack of access to him. But the fact of the matter is, when he goes off script, they don't know what he's going to say. And constantly, he will go off script at a speech And then the White House goes into crisis mode to go, oh, that's not what he meant. That's not what he meant. When when conservatives would defend Donald Trump after he would say something by saying, well, that's not what you're saying that, but that's not what he meant. The liberal media poo pooed that. Like, well, that's what he said. Well, no, most of the time it wasn't what he said, but now they're using the same excuse. Oh, that's not what he meant.
Agreed. Well, closing on this, we talked about the news media. Fox News, I think, is in a crossroads. I think they've lost a lot of credibility. To be fair, email, text message trails linking their key pundits, Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, Rupert Murdoch himself, basically perpetuating a, let's just say, non truth, knowing that the election was not rigged but lost by Donald J. Trump himself, where the irregularities probably, obviously, yes, there were. But basically, there's a paper trail, and also there's a lot of controversy on Tucker Carlson basically articulating a certain view of January 6th. My read on that is if it's true, okay. If it's not, I, he is not qualified to be a journalist or to be on the news. I think it's somewhere in between. I think he's selectively editing footage. And again, I would say, in my own humble opinion, was it the insurrection that Nancy Pelosi and Schumer and the liberal media said it was? No, but it was nothing that was as benign as a basal cell.
No, well, I mean, Tucker Carlson isn't a journalist.
I know, but
Tuck,
he has an
Tucker
audience
Carlson,
that believes him, and he's doing a huge disservice if it is in fact the way it was, that this was a nothing burger and everything's okay here, but it's actually not.
yeah, well, again, Tucker Carlson is basically the Rachel Maddow of the right. Neither one of these people should be believed. They tell half the story at best and outright, misinformation at worst. I hope this is a come to Jesus moment for Fox News because they, like MSNBC, have been kowtowing to their audience for ratings. Now, Fox
And
News
for
has
cash,
ratings, yeah, and for cash. Now, I'll be honest, the Fox News, I'm going to differentiate it as essentially two separate organizations because Fox News has a very good news organization. And if you want to see this, you watch America's Newsroom from 9 to 11 a.m. They also have a propaganda arm, which is Fox News Prime Time. Prime Time has nothing to do with news. And MSNBC, they have the same thing where they have
well, hold
their
on,
prime their
hold on, hold
prime
on, hold on, hold on. I think you are. I'm in great articulation. 100% well done, my friend. Yes, there's two wings of Fox News. My only disagreement would be MSNBC. There is
well,
no
you didn't
viable
you,
news on
no,
that shit ass thing.
you didn't let me finish with
Sorry.
MSNBC. MSNBC has the same prime time where it's misinformation, half truths, all of this, but MSNBC does not have a news gathering organization, which is unfortunate because it's part of NBC News and both NBC News and CNBC, which is part of the same family, both have excellent news gathering organizations, but MSNBC doesn't use them.
No, they don't. I would agree with you. Your analysis of it is spot on. I'm glad I jumped the gun because it proves that we, without knowing what you were going to say, I 100% concur with your assertion. I do believe that Fox, I think there's going to be a lot of turbulence at Fox because they are, as you said, at a juncture, at the proverbial crossroads. If they continue on the Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson crazy train, they lose credibility, just like MSNBC is not a credible news organization, or they have a choice to have Brett Baer and all the others that you were talking about, foregone mentioned, which is absolutely correct. Final thoughts,
Yeah,
Dr. Lopkin.
I think we are right now at a crossroads in news media between what's going on at Fox and the rebuilding of CNN. The optimist in me says hopefully these organizations will fix the problems and go back to being actual news organizations. The pessimist in me says they're going to kowtow for ratings because that's what media does. I
My
would,
assertion, my humble assertion, Dr. Lopkin, is the canary in the coal mine is CNN. If they start going down a certain road of actual, um, somewhat objective news delivery, then I think your assertion is more than valid, or your optimistic belief. If they don't, then I think the thing's just headed down the shitter like it's always been going for the last many years.
yeah, that's the problem is that both of these organizations, Fox News is now the core essentially of Fox because so much of the company was sold off to Disney. You no longer have 20th Century Fox as a profit center, and the different, FX network and FXX network.
That was a
All,
mistake, by the way.
well, it was a good move for Disney. The
Yeah,
problem,
for Disney, perfect.
yeah,
Yeah, for
for
Fox, not good.
for Fox, it was a bad move, and they should have maintained more. I mean, realistically, Disney didn't care about most of Fox's assets. They wanted the film library to fuel the streaming services,
Yes, they did.
which that's going the wrong way also, and you're starting to see streaming services cut back. And the biggest thing, though, was they wanted the rights to the X-Men and Fantastic Four from Marvel so that they could consolidate their Marvel rights. Well, they could have just bought those things, uh, kept Fox, basically kept Fox News. They kept the Fox network because there was no way the FCC was going to allow Disney to own two of the four major broadcast networks. But they got Disney got all the other cable networks. The only thing they didn't get in cable networks were the sports networks.
No, I
Fox
got
could
that,
have,
all of that. I think the problem for Fox is credibility because yes, they're the most watched new cable news organizations, hands down, no question. The
right,
problem
but
is no, the problem is profitability. Where
yes.
CNN has half the audience, but guess who advertises on CNN? BMW. Guess who advertises on Fox? Laser hair growth and My Pillow. Not quite the same league.
Well, it's not just about the advertisers because, quite frankly, CNN's advertising rates are much lower than Fox's because of the audience. But the problem is that Fox News does not have the other divisions anymore of Fox to make a profit. So they are pushed to make a profit, which terrifies me, quite frankly, because it tells me that they're going to keep going after the ratings rather than the
Well,
credibility.
the
And that's a
emails and the texts and the
yeah,
depositions prove your point out.
yeah, and that's a big problem. CNN, Warner Brothers Discovery has a ton of other profit centers, but they are cutting costs. They are pushing everything to be a profit center. So I don't know which way they're going to go with CNN. But news didn't used to be a profit center. In fact, it was widely accepted that the news divisions of networks and companies were loss leaders. And we need to get back to that. They need to focus on news rather than ratings and
But when
entertainment.
all your chips are in one basket, that's going to be hard
E-
to do.
Exactly.
Well, great show, Dr. Lopkin. And unlike Fox News, I believe Carnivore Radio is on a roll.
We are, and you can, of course, we can find out what you think about all of this if you go to xvadio.com/connect and let us know what you're thinking. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Carnivore Radio website, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
I thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Your insights were even above your pay grade today.
Well, thank you.
I'll see you next week.
We'll see you then.